Hey gang, it's good to see you again today. I appreciate having one of my deacons with me again tonight. Several of my deacons have volunteered to come, but this is Dwayne Nightingale. He's one of the 6 deacons that we have in the church, and we have taken our church roll and divided it out among our deacons so that every deacon in our church has 10, 11, sometimes maybe 12 families that they have a special responsibility for. Dwayne, how are you keeping up with your families during this period of time with this COVID problem?
I'm trying pretty hard. I mean, I called Retha and wished her a happy birthday, and she said, "Oh, thank you, dear."
They don't all say dear, do you?
And I've called them all, told them we weren't having church, so I have been in contact with them. We're not having church again.
No, not this Thursday, probably not the next day, but we'll let people know when that time comes.
Okay.
You know, God has blessed us with having a group of good deacons. We have 6 deacons in our church. We have divided our congregation, all the families among these deacons, so that every deacon has, as I've said, about 10 or 11 families. And that makes my task as a shepherd much easier. I'm going to talk tonight about this matter of being a shepherd. It's because that's the ministry that we have. People sometimes refer to me, they'll say, "Hey, pastor, how are you doing?" Well, the word pastor, we derive that word from the same word we get the word shepherd from. The role of a shepherd and the role of a pastor is basically the same. A deacon, by the way, Dwayne, I hope you know this, the deacon means that you're to be a servant, because that's where that comes from. So I'm to be shepherding you, and you're to be serving me. You understand?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you the opportunity to do that too. Over 150 years ago, there was a young lady by the name of Elizabeth Kaplane. She was born in 1868, I believe, and she died as a fairly young lady, about 39. But she wrote a poem. She was writing children's literature, and she wrote some poems. And she wrote a poem called The 90 and 9. And later on, a musician, an old-time evangelistic musician by the name of Ira Shanky, got hold of that poem, and he turned it into a music. And a lot of people have sung it. Maybe you have sung it yourself sometimes, but it's called The 99. And I'm not going to sing it, don't worry about it, but the poem goes something like this. There were 99 that safely lay in the shelter of the fold, but one was out on the hills that day, far away from the gates of gold, away from the shepherd's tender care, away from the tender's love and fare. And then it goes on to say, Lord, you have here your 90 and 9. Are they not enough for thee? But the shepherd made answer, no, this one of mine has wandered away from me. And so off through the mountains, thunder riven, till up from the rocky steep, there arose a glad cry to the gates of heaven, rejoice, I have found my sheep. And the answer echoed around the throne, rejoice, for the Lord brings back his own. Of course, this poem that Elizabeth wrote was taken out of the Jesus talking about being the good shepherd and how a good shepherd takes care of his sheep, and the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. David was a shepherd, and the most beautiful psalm that we have in our book is from Psalms 23, and we call it the Shepherd's Psalm. That begins by saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou anointest my head with oil. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemy. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's the good shepherd, the 23rd Psalm, which we call the Shepherd's Psalm. You know, the Bible tells us that God is a shepherd and that Jesus is a shepherd. And one of the nice things I like about having God as my shepherd, you know, he never loses one. Sometimes I have lost God, but Dwayne, he's never lost me. He's always keeping an eye on me. I want to tell a story about that in a moment. You know, the word lost is a horrible word. You know, someday the husband comes in, and I remember, well, I don't remember because I wasn't there, but back when the great stock market crashed in the 20s, and the husband had to come home and say, sweetheart, I've lost my job. Or, darling, we've lost our savings, and we've lost everything that we have. We've lost our home. And that's pretty bad. Or maybe you come in someday and say, sweetheart, I think I've lost my health. If those don't bother you, how about this one? We've lost a child. You know, that can be pretty bad. Let me tell a little story about that. And don't get mad in advance as I tell this story, but it's a good story and it's true. When I was about 6 years old, I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had my brother. Brother's a year and a half older than me. And so this was back in 1947, 1948. And my mother's sister had come to visit us, and she'd come with her husband. And they got in my dad's old Ford, and they drove downtown. All of us did, my mother and my dad and her sister, my mother's sister and her husband. And my brother and I and my sister Janine, we all got in my dad's old Ford. We drove downtown Tulsa and parked and went into one of the old department stores downtown. You remember what a department store was? We don't have many of those left anymore. Well, we went to the department store, and we were having a good time shopping around, looking at everything. Came time for us to leave, and everybody went out and got in the car, piled in, all of us, and started on the way home. We were driving down the road going back home, and my mother said, "Where's Steve?" And we all looked around, and Steve wasn't in the car with us. Somehow we'd gotten, everybody was pulling one another, and the car was crowded and everything, and we left Steve in the department store in downtown Tulsa, and he was 8 years old. Well, needless to say, my dad turned the car around, and we started driving back toward town, and we were coming into town, and we saw my brother walking down the sidewalk, just crying. Well, we'd lost him. Now, before you get too mad at my mother and my dad for losing my brother, I want to remind you that Mary and Joseph did the same thing one time. They had gone to the city of Jerusalem. They were with a crowd of people, a lot of relatives around them, and it came time to go home, and they just made an assumption. They said, well, our little boy Jesus is with some of the other relatives. He's in the group. He's somewhere around. And they left, and they traveled an entire day journey before they found out Jesus was lost. Well, actually, Jesus wasn't lost. It was Mary and Joseph that were lost. They had lost their son. And they turned around and went back to Jerusalem. The Bible says they spent several days looking for him, frantically, panicking, looking for him everywhere they could. Finally, they found him. You know where they found him? Grace Mennonite Church. No, there wasn't any Grace Mennonite Church. They found him in the temple, closest thing they could get there, okay? They found him in the temple. And Mary said, "Son, why have you worried your father and I so?" And Jesus said those memorable words. He said, "Mom, don't you know I have to be about my daddy's business?" Well, we don't like this idea of being lost. Because lost is, have you ever been lost? I've been lost. I've been in some cities in excess of 20 million people. And didn't know where to go. Didn't have anybody could speak. I couldn't speak the language. Didn't know what I was going to do. You know, and it's not a fun thing to be lost. Jesus told parables about things that got lost. He told a series of parables one day. He told a parable about a woman who lost a coin and how she scoured the house looking for that. She told a parable about a man that had lost a son, what we call the parable, the prodigal son, who had gone off to a far country, and the boy was lost. He was lost to his dad. He was lost to his family. Jesus told parables about things that are lost. And being lost is one of the worst possible things that can happen to us. Well, when I think about people getting lost, I'm grateful that God gives us shepherds. People refer to me as pastor, and that means they say, "Pastor, don't lose me." And that's my job, to shepherd the church. And that's the job of the deacons. They're to be under shepherds with me and working on keeping people in line. And, you know, all of us sometimes have been lost. It's not a comfortable feeling at all to be lost. But particularly, what if you think about your being lost in a spiritual sense? Lost away from God, lost away from an eternal home, lost away from everything that ultimately is going to matter in this world. You know, gang, you and I, we're going to lose everything we have. We spend so much of our lives trying to build up a home. We get a car, we pay off the mortgages, we do all these kinds of things. Let me tell you something. Everything that you have that you look to your bank account to cover, you're going to lose it. It's all going to be gone someday. And, you know, that's okay. The one thing that I don't want to lose, I don't want to lose that part of my life that is eternal. I don't want to lose my soul. And I'm so glad that Jesus tells me that he's a good shepherd. And the good shepherd that lays down his life for a sheep. You know, there's times I've been lost, times I've lost Jesus, but he's never lost me. He's stayed with me, he's kept me, he's guided me, he's guarded me. And it's a horrible thing to be lost, but it's a marvelous thing to be found. And so when Elizabeth wrote that song, the 90 and 9, she talks about the shepherd who lays the sheep on his shoulders and comes home rejoicing, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the sheep which was lost." You know, I hope you're not lost. But if you don't have Jesus Christ in your life, you don't have the Good Shepherd in your life. You're not lost to God, but he's lost to you. And you need to turn your life back to him and holler out and say, Jesus, save me. Because I assure you, he hears you. He wants to be with you. He wants you to be saved. He wants you to come to him. And he has good things for you. When that shepherd brought that sheep back home, there was a welcome for that sheep. And someday God's going to bring us home too. And there's going to be welcome home. Welcome home. Kill the fatted calf. Put a ring on his finger and a robe on his back. This my son was lost and is found. Rejoice with me. God bless. That's it.